Despite not doing drills at the NFL Combine, Heisman Trophy winner Fernando Mendoza was met with loud cheers in Indianapolis as he continues his draft prep. And much of his talent will be evaluated later at Indiana's Pro Day. And while we know his charisma is off the charts, it's still not quite enough to give him a complete grade in terms of the draft, at least not for our Mike Renner. Mendoza, one of 10 players marked incomplete in our Combine draft grade book, but still some intriguing names to pay attention to on that incomplete list. Guys like Rueben Bain out of Miami, Jordyn Tyson out of Arizona State. And of course, you got to keep your eye on the draft because it will be here before you know it. Let's get to handing out some of those post-combine draft grades with our Mike Renner and his Pushing the Pile podcast co-host, JP Acosta. Guys, I want to start with that list of incompletes there. Of course, we saw Fernando Mendoza's name there. We know he will be what we expect to be at least the #1 overall pick, barring an arrest that was apparently very popular to talk about at the Combine. Either way, Renner, when you look at that list of incompletes, who else has your attention? Who are you the most excited to hand out a grade to?
I think there's two guys that really catch my attention. One's Rueben Bain, because everyone knows the arm length, and I think he may be one of the most average athletes of a top 5 pick ever. He's not that impressive and shouldn't be that impressive from a testing perspective, but I want to know what kind of athlete we're really dealing with. It's not really how he wins. He wins with pure strength. He's one of the strongest prospects I've ever scouted. So I'm not too worried, but putting numbers to it will be nice. And then Jeremiah McCoy from Tennessee is the other one, because we haven't seen him play football. We haven't seen him move at all since last January. And his tape as a sophomore was elite tape. It was still probably the best of any guy in this class, but that was as a sophomore. And I just need to see what he looks like. If he looks like the guy we saw on tape last year, I think he could be a top 10 to 15 pick. If not, though, he has a lot riding on that testing. If he doesn't look fully healthy, he may not even go first round.
I'm definitely in lockstep with Rueben Bain Jr., but I do want to focus on Jordyn Tyson, wide receiver from Arizona State. He didn't run. The medicals were obviously going to be the biggest question for him. Broken collarbone, had multiple hamstring injuries in his final season. But if those medicals really do check out, he still should be a first-round lock. The body control, the separation skills at receiver, at 6'2", 200 pounds. He plays football like his brother Jordyn Tyson, who plays for the Cleveland Cavaliers. So I think he's still going to go very high. I do wonder what he runs when he runs at his pro day, but he's just another guy that I'm very curious on, and I want to see another grade for him. And another guy is Peter Woods, defensive tackle from Clemson. He's another one of those shorter arm defensive tackles. I think his variance when it comes to where he goes in first round mocks, I've seen him as high as 10 to Cincinnati. I've seen him as low as in the 30s to one of the Super Bowl champion teams. So I think there's a lot of variance when it comes to defensive tackles with shorter arms. Only 3 defensive tackles over the last few years have gone in the first 2 days with under 31.5-inch arms like Woods. But those guys have all been Braden Fisk, Kobe Turner, Kalijah Cansey, all guys that win in the same way as Peter Woods. So in this draft, I still think he's a first-round player, but I do want to get some numbers and testing behind the production that he had in 2024.
Short arms will be a topic of conversation in just a bit, so hold that thought, JP, as we work our way down here. Obviously, you guys have your list of your top prospects. We've seen a handful of those guys in the top 10, including Mendoza and Rueben Bain. So let's work our way through the top 10 here in terms of the grades. And we'll start, Mike, with number 3, edge Arvell Reese out of Ohio State. Why did he earn an A from you in the grade book?
So when you run a 4.46 at over 240 pounds and look the way he did in the on-field drills, that is exactly what you want to see from a top 5 pick. You want high-end athleticism, high-end movement skills, and then the production is the one thing that it's like, yeah, we didn't get to see it, because I think most people, if you're going to say we're drafting him number 2 overall, are doing it to have him rush the passer. That's why he's getting talked about in that realm. And when he did do it, it was impressive on tape, but obviously didn't do a ton of it. You want to see an athlete that's translatable. That is about as translatable athlete to the edge as you'll see in the NFL draft. So a box holy tick there for Arvell Reese.
It's so funny that Arvell Reese and his teammate linebacker Sonny Styles ran the same 40 time, because they're both similar caliber athletes. But I think Arvell Reese plays a little bit more power in his hands. That's why he's more of an edge player. But I think the most important thing for him is saying that he is an outside linebacker who can walk down onto the line of scrimmage. That's where people get paid. That's where you see Myles Garrett, Micah Parsons get $40 million a year. So him saying he's an edge sort of locks himself into that number 2 consideration for the New York Jets.
Let's move on to number 4, where we find offensive tackle Kadyn Proctor. And Mike, you have a great article up on CBSSports.com right now just detailing the size in the draft, what that really means, and specifically what it means to the big man in Kadyn Proctor. He comes in around 350 pounds. I mean, this is a big man here. But the question you posed online is, how big is too big? So I'll encourage folks to check out that article. But in the meantime, while you're here, how much does that size play into your grade here for Kadyn Proctor?
Yeah, so for a guy that big, he's obviously an impressive mover. 5'2", 140, 32.5-inch vertical. Those are elite numbers when you compare him to guys 350 plus. The problem is 350 plus doesn't help you when you got to block Arvell Reese, right? It doesn't help you when the guy across from you runs a 4.46. So movement skills still are king at the offensive tackle position, and he is when it comes to comparing him to guys like Blake Miller, Monroe Freeling, the other offensive tackles in this draft class. He was a clear tier below those guys in terms of his pure movement skills. So I think that's why I go B here. And then the other reason being his wingspan came in at only 6'9" and 5/8 for a 6'7" guy. He doesn't have that broad shoulders that you usually think about when you think about the 350 plus pounders. So those two things combined, it's still, this guy's still a heck of an athlete. Still could be an elite tackle at the NFL level. I just don't think he came in this true freakish marvel that a lot of people were billing him as.
Yeah, I think the athleticism was good, but if you followed Kadyn Proctor for most of his college career, you knew he was a very good athlete. I think there's still a lot of questions that are needed to be asked with his lateral quickness, his ability to play in space, which is why I still sort of think the conversion to guard is still possible. But I think either way, you're getting a guy that has the ability to play tackle, can play guard. I think, like I said, be a better guard in the NFL, but he didn't necessarily close the gap between he and guys like Monroe Freeling, Caleb Lomu, Blake Miller when it comes to being a pure tackle at the NFL level.
All right, let's stay with the position and talk about number 5 on this list, Spencer Fano. And I mentioned arm length was an interesting topic of conversation at the Combine. He's one of those guys, JP, that falls into the questionable arm length wingspan, if you will, here. Mike Renner gave him an A in his grade book. Do you agree or disagree?
I absolutely agree. I mean, he looked like the best offensive lineman of all the groups that participated in on-field drills. The way he was moving, he was smooth, getting in and out protections. His ability to run, ran a 4.91 40-yard dash, 32-inch vertical. And it backs up what's on tape, which is a very good lateral mover. I do think the arm length is going to still be a question, but when you move the way that he does, I think there's potential for him not only to be a fine tackle, but I think what most impressed me was him taking snaps at center and him snapping the ball. That provides that versatility and the ability to play all 5 positions. So I think he is still locking himself into the first round. Wouldn't be surprised if he goes top 15 because that versatility is king in the NFL. And we've seen a lot of guys go from tackle to center and be Pro Bowl caliber players.
It's an A for me in terms of the flow too. Like all those pictures where like the hair was flowing, you love to see it. Not an A for Carnell Tate, who comes in at number 8 on our prospect list. He might as well, Mike, just have been, he should have just stayed at home. The 40 was disappointing. It dropped his rankings as well here. Bills GM Brandon Beane went as far as to say, quote, "He's pretty slow. I probably wouldn't take him early." I mean, if a team like Buffalo, who desperately needs wide receivers, isn't interested here, what more can you tell us about the Carnell Tate grade?
Well, I think he was doing a little posturing there. I think he wants him to fall to that second half of the first round. But I don't think it's drops him too much in my eyes, but you have to admit it is disappointing because not only was he, 4.53, I didn't think he was a blazer, but he came in shorter and lighter than what he's listed as Ohio State. If you come in lighter, I want you to run faster than I expected, not a little bit slower. So and that's all he did. So it's not a huge basis to go off of. Obviously, on the fast track at OSU, he'll probably be somewhere in the 4.4s. I'm not too worried about Carnell Tate, but it is jockeying at the top. It's a tight race at the top, and every little thing matters. So if you had ties at the top, you may be falling him down in your receiver rankings.
All right, we'll keep our eye on it there. We wrap this up at number 10 with the linebacker Sonny Styles. Mike, he really impressed you enough to give him an A+.
Yeah, I mean, I think he impressed everybody. That was the best linebacker performance I've ever seen. It backs up what you saw on tape. This guy is a true specimen of specimens. And this isn't an Isaiah Simmons sort of projection. Sonny Styles already did it. I mean, he was awesome last year at Ohio State as a true off-ball linebacker. No positional conversion here. No worries about anything like that. So this is what you want to see when you're drafting a linebacker top 5 to 10. I think you could pretty much pencil him in to a top 10 selection after that performance.
All right, the grading season officially underway. The combine is in the books. Up next, of course, that NFL draft. Want to give you one quick peek at Mike Renner's top 10 prospect grades that we just went through there. Some A's, a C+ for Carnell Tate. The fellas, though, going to stick around for just a few more minutes. Some more grading to do, Tiffany.
Yes, let's keep it going. Jeremiyah Love, after his showing in Indy, what grade did he receive? Plenty more on the way when we come back here on HQ Spotlight. Welcome back. More from the combine. Corner Avieon Terrell, the corner out of Clemson, has already said corner twice. He showed out on the field drills at the combine. A lot of folks really impressed with his body control, his ball skills. He didn't take part in any of the measurables, but that may not matter. And we bring back Mike Renner and JP Acosta. Hey guys, good to have you back with us. Let's stick with that corner with Avieon. What grade are you giving him based on his performance, Mike?
I went with an A-. I thought in the on-field workout portion, he was easily the smoothest corner in the mix. His footwork, his ability to flip his hips, it is exactly what you want to see from a corner. And I'll also say this, he is listed at 180, comes in 186, heavier than expected, and also for a sub 5'11 corner, had a really long wingspan, 6'3.5". That is right in the realm of where you want to see a sort of outside corner at the next level. So I think he proved that he could either play outside or in the slot, even if those jumps that he had, the 34-inch vertical, 10-3 broad jump, they are not necessarily what you want to see from a first-round pick. I'll take the movement skills on the football field, though.
And when you watch Avieon Terrell play, the urgency that he plays with, the transition to hips, like Mike said, that all shows up on tape. And I think he's a guy that can play inside or outside. I like him outside, but as a nickel, that could be really fun for a lot of teams, especially with the way that he tackles and the way that he competes at the catch point. But the way that he moves, his footwork, like the transition in his hips, it is very similar to his brother AJ Terrell, who's the corner for the Atlanta Falcons. And you can tell the NFL pedigree when Avieon Terrell is out on the field. He's a guy that I'm really excited for, one of my favorite corners in this draft class. So I'm really glad that he gets an A- after his combine performance.
It's always all in the hips for corner position. On to offensive tackle, Caleb Lomu out of Utah. He showed big man athleticism, 32.5-inch vertical and a 9.5 broad jump. I know what you better be grading him, Mike.
I went with an A. I mean, This guy just ticked every single box here. He was as clean as you could expect from an offensive tackle prospect. Those are all fantastic numbers. And then in the on-field workouts, it was just the lateral agility, the smoothness, the easiness with which he moves was evident. That's the guy we saw on tape at Utah. Now, he didn't do the bench press. He didn't put up numbers there. That is the one thing. Now, not to say the bench press is the end all be all, but that's the one thing, his play strength, that is still the biggest question mark that needs to be improved upon. But he's young. He's a junior. He will improve in that. And so I had a number 14 going into this. I don't see that changing after this.
The thing that stood out the most with Caleb Lomu's workout is actually his weigh-in. He weighed in at 313 pounds, so I think it's heavier than his listed weight at Utah of 308. And for me, the biggest thing was, like Mike said, the play strength was a little bit of a concern. Comes in 5 pounds heavier, still is able to run fast, still is able to look light-footed, still looks athletic when he does the drills. I thought he was one of the smoothest offensive linemen that participated at tackles, so he's working himself back into round one conversations. I wouldn't be surprised given his length, given the size, he has prototypical tackle size, and given his movement skills, he's one of the guys that goes first because he is a true left tackle and what you look for in left tackle measurables.
Let's talk about another guy on the O-line, Vega Ioane. He had a great workout. He didn't run the 40-yard dash, but did he do enough to impress you in the on-the-field drills, Mike?
He did. He pretty much ticked the box. I just love the balance and base that he plays with. When you watch him, you just see the upper half and the lower half consistently in concert with each other. And that's what you want from an offensive lineman. They need to have that full body coordination to be able to block consistently. And then while I never expected an elite athlete, just given who he is, he's over 320 pounds. He is more of a power player than anything. He still tested pretty well in his jump. So I gave it a B+, box ticked, still the top guard on the board coming in here.
Yep, the beat goes on for Vega Ioane. I do think that he is still the top interior offensive lineman in this draft class. But what really stood out is his ability to play and redirect. I know there are a lot of questions about his lateral agility, lateral quickness. I don't think he's the fleetest of foot, and you're not going to ask him to run out on screens and stuff, but his ability to mirror and pass protection was actually pretty good when I saw at the combine. And like Mike said, he plays with a really strong, really wide base. He has the look of a prototypical guard. So I think he is going to be the first interior offensive lineman off the board, and the beat still goes on for him and still going to be a round 1 player.
You said fleetest of foot? How old are you, JP? I feel like you're bringing back some old man terms there. Okay, we'll keep it going. The running back out of Notre Dame, who is fleetest of foot, Jeremiyah Love, folks saying he really set the tone with his 4.36 40 time. Mike, did his stock rise even more?
It did, just because this guy could have done nothing the entire pre-draft process and no one would have batted an eye. That's kind of par for the course nowadays, is the guys who are going to go top 10, they just opt out. They don't have to test. They don't have to prove anything to anybody. But he went at the NFL Combine in Indy in a situation that's not what he's used to, and he put up a 4.36 40. He went through all the drills at running back and just looked like what you want to see from a top 10 pick. So that competitiveness, that's who I want to draft at the running back position. And then 32-inch arms. The frame is that of a guy who can really pluck it out of the air. That gives quarterbacks a big target to throw to on swing passes and out of the backfield. That expect him to go no lower than 9th overall in April.
Yeah, I mean, Jeremiyah Love really did everything that you expected him to at the combine. He ran the same 40-yard dash as Jahmyr Gibbs while being almost 15 pounds heavier. I think the question now for Jeremiyah Love isn't whether he's going to go first round, it's how high he goes. I've seen people considering he goes 3 to Arizona, 4 to Tennessee. I mean, when you look at how he competed in Indy, when it comes to doing the running back drills, he looked like the best player on the field. And even after, he went and did receiver drills and looked like the best player on the field. So his ability to do that, the home run ability with the speed, I think he's locking himself into the top 10.
So an A+ for Love. All right, on to receiver Omar Cooper from Indiana. JP, we know that Mike is giving him an A. So what do you like about him, especially after his 4.42 40?
I think that's the biggest thing. He answered a question for me with his speed. I do know that he's a lot quicker than fast. I think his shiftiness from the slot really helps create open windows, and his body control and his contact balance as a receiver really stands out when you watch him play. Just get the ball in his hands and he can make a lot of people miss. But having that ability to be a long speed threat, his ability to get downfield in a hurry, is going to be what separates him from the rest of this receiver class outside of the top 3 when it comes to Carnell Tate, Makai Lemon from USC, and Jordyn Tyson. His ability to be apt to win after the catch is probably the best of all those guys. So I think being able to run the 4.42 really helps him out, and he is again going to be a guy that's going to get a lot of first round consideration.
All right, guys, sit tight. Mike and JP will be right back with us. And here's a little recap for you from Mike Renner's Combine prospect grades. And of course, Avieon Terrell getting that A-, Lomu the A, and as you can see, Jeremiyah Love, who we discussed, getting the only A+ on that list. All right, as we continue, more from Mike and JP, we'll take a look at 2 Texas Tech prospects included in this group and a closer look at these guys in the trenches. Stay with us. Rolling along here on HQ Spotlight, edge rusher David Bailey out of Texas Tech really shined at the Combine. His 4.5 40 grabbed your attention. This dude was moving at a speed of close to 23 miles an hour. So we welcome back our Mike Renner and JP Acosta as we continue to look at Mike's Combine prospect grades. No doubt David Bailey impressed. So what's your grade for him, Mike, and why?
I went with a B+. This one was tough because I think I talked about with Avieon Terrell earlier that he was great in the on-field, but his testing numbers weren't great. I think Bailey is the opposite. I think his testing numbers were outstanding. A 4.5 40, 10.9 broad jump. That's what it's supposed to look like for a top 5 pick on the edge. But then you see him in the drills, and he's kind of slipping when he's asked to change directions, looked a little stiff at times, and that's my biggest worry with him and why he was truthfully 19 on my board to begin with. So I'm not double counting the athleticism, and I'm going to go with a B+ for his combine performance.
I think a B+ is fair for David Bailey, especially because if you thought he was fast going in, he was going to impress you because he was going to run a 4.5 40. That was on the tape. But like Mike said, during the on-field drills, he looked a little stiff. I worry about his change of direction. Those are the two biggest things for Bailey. But if you were looking for him to run very fast and jump really high, that's exactly what he did. And the biggest thing is that he just competed. And when you look at Rueben Bain not participating at the combine, that's the guy that is sort of competing with him in the top 5, top 10 in mock drafts. So, and the fact that he competed puts him at a B+, but I do think Mike is correct in not putting him higher because of what he did on field.
Also out of Texas Tech, defensive lineman Lee Hunter. He had a breakout season, but Mike, what are you grading him coming out of the combine?
I hate giving him a C here because I think he's still one of the best defensive tackles in this class, but it's just hard to draft a guy that highly who's not a high-end athlete. And that's what his testing suggested. He actually had a first percentile vertical jump. It's one of the 5 worst vertical jumps of the defensive tackle position at the combine over the past 2 decades. That's never a great selling point for a first-round pick, unfortunately. 18th percentile broad jump for a guy who came in over 10 pounds lower than his listed weight. I expected just a little bit more explosiveness from him. 5.18 40 is fine, but this is probably not the profile of a first round pick. I would bet he falls to the second at this point.
It's tough for a defensive tackle, especially a nose tackle, to impress at the combine. But like Mike said, I don't think Lee Hunter really impressed here. The explosive numbers were really concerning for me. And even though Lee Hunter is a guy that wins with power, I don't think quickness is ever going to be the name of his game. But the explosive numbers were the biggest question mark, because while the run defense is going to get you in the door and that's going to get you drafted high, the ceiling is set by how well you can rush the passer and how high end of an athlete you are. And Lee Hunter's ceiling seems to be sort of capped by just not being that great of an athlete. So definitely agree with a C here.
Yeah, athleticism on full display out at the combine, as we know. Blake Miller, the offensive tackle out of Clemson, he had a stellar season. And then you pair that with what we saw at the combine for him. It kind of showed maybe he can make an immediate impact on a team. What are you giving him as a grade, Mike?
I have to give him an A. He ticked every single box. And the thing I love about Miller that some of these other guys don't really have is the arm length. I mean, 34.25 inches. Everyone's coming in under 33, under 31. And he has prototypical size at 6'7", 317. And then the athleticism, 5'04", 40, 32-inch vertical, 9'5" broad jump. It's just the entire package there that you could want. So backs up what you saw on tape. When that's the case, and especially at a position that's as traits driven as offensive tackle is, I fully expect to lock him in to the first round.
If you were looking for an offensive tackle you could draw up to be a first round caliber guy just based on traits and athleticism, you might draw Blake Miller. Like I said, 6'7", 317, 34.25 inch arms. That's what you want from a prototypical right tackle in the NFL. And then his movement skills at the combine matched what showed up on tape. I do think there's a little bit of issues when it comes to his anchor, some of the play strength concerns, but when you're as big as he is and can run the way that he did and have long arms like he does, those guys are going to go a lot higher than you think.
Let's stick with the O-line. What are you grading Max Iheanachor? Because it seems like he only solidified the fact that he's a standout among the group, Mike.
Yeah, I think everyone had the exact same tape on Iheanachor coming into this. He's a heck of an athlete, but he's not been playing football for that long, only started playing once he got to college. How freaky is he? Well, it turns out he's the freakiest guy in this entire tackle class. 4'9", 140 at over 320 pounds. 9'7" broad jump, 25 bench press reps. That is what it's supposed to look like, folks. That is a high-end testing athlete that if you're going to try to develop in the NFL, that's about as good as you can get from a developmental perspective. So he ain't close. The other guys have better tape than him in this tackle class, but what his ceiling could be with those numbers is special.
What stood out to me the most with Iheanachor during his workout was his footwork, and that's no surprise for me, especially for a guy who played soccer and basketball growing up, didn't play college football or organized football until he got to junior college. So I think he is another guy that's, like Mike said, sort of a project, but I'd rather have my project be able to run 4.91, put up numbers I did on bench press, and be able to move that the way Iheanachor does than a guy that has a little bit more limited of an upside. So again, I do still see him as sort of a late first round guy after the combine performance, but the way that he ran and the way that he moved, that is a guy that you can bet on and someone you can try and mold into a high quality right tackle.
And being fleet of foot, right? Right, JP?
Yes.
I just wanted to bring that back. Hey, let's. All right, with Cashius Howell, I know he ran a 4.59, guys, for an edge rusher. Mike, what grade are you giving him?
I hate to give him this because it didn't do anything that's his fault, but it's a C- because of sheer fact that he will have the shortest arms of any drafted defensive end in the NFL since at least 2004. 30.25 inches. It's over an inch shorter than anyone starting in the NFL nowadays. And the NFL hates outliers. They want guys who fit the correct mold, and unfortunately Howell's body type just does not fit the mold of a defensive end. So that was obviously always going to be the case. His arms haven't changed since last year. Teams knew that going in, but to have a number on it that's that small is just unfortunate for him. And then to back that up, another insult to injury almost was his jumps. They just were not commensurate with a undersized, explosive edge rusher. 32.5 inches. That's the same as Kadyn Proctor had, and he's 100 pounds lighter than Kadyn Proctor. So Cashius Howell, with those numbers, I think he will not be a first rounder anymore.
With Cashius Howell, if you thought he had short arms going into the combine, that shouldn't change. Like that, your perception of Cashius Howell shouldn't change based on the fact that he has short arms, because he had short arms on tape. The biggest concern for me is even outside of the 40-yard dash where he looked quick, was, like Mike said, those jumps. Those aren't explosive jumps, and I think that explosiveness is an indicator of a guy that might not have the highest athletic upside. While I do think he is going to be a very good designated pass rusher in the NFL, I worry about how limited his athletic upside is because he just doesn't move like a very explosive athlete. He can flatten at the top of his pass rush really well, but again, like when you have those short arms and when you have the inability to create explosion off of just instant movements like you do with vertical jumps, with broad jumps, it causes a lot of concern. So I still think, given this draft class, 32 guys still got to go in the first round at the end of the day. So I think Cashius Howell might still sneak back into the back half of round one, because I do think a lot of teams still love his pass rush ability, but it is going to be a little worrying given his athletic upside still seems to be a little limited.
All right, guys, we enjoyed breaking down your list, Mike. Great insight from both of you, Mike and JP. Appreciate it. And if you want more from these guys, you can scan that QR code on the right of your screen for the Push in the Pile podcast.